y'all, I am so excited to introduce the wonderful Candace Parrott to the Confidence from the Ground Up podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. It really is a pleasure to be on here. And I just cannot thank you enough for doing what you do and getting this awareness out here. We love people like you. Thank you.
I am. And the chemistry here is so great. It is so real, y'all. Before we started recording, well, technically it was after we started recording, but y'all aren't going to hear it. Like, we have already, we've got such great chemistry. Our conversation, our humor styles is on point. So this is going to be so good. So before I get carried away with how excited I am that you are here, who are you? What do you do? And let's go from there.
Okay, my name is Candace Parrott. I am a life coach and also a public awareness committee member for the Maryland Human Trafficking Task Force. We are anti-trafficking, so we get the word out there, as you can tell, across the nation, just not across Maryland, but across the nation. And this is something that we're all passionate about, and we get it out there. And so we life coach and do everything that we need to do, educate you on what is going on. So in a nutshell, that's who I am. All the rest doesn't matter because it's not about me, it's about our survivors.
I love that. And this is the power of internet. I promise I'm not going to go on this too far, but this is really cool. So I actually came across Candace in a virtual event that my friend Jennifer put on, and she did this wonderful presentation, and she's going to give you just a snippet of that today. And I would not have gotten connected with her had it not been for the fact that it was a Zoom conference that I almost forgot about. I genuinely almost forgot to sign up for it. And it blows my mind. It just absolutely blows my mind. So let's start with, today's episode, as you heard in the introduction, we are going to be talking about human trafficking today. And the thing that a lot of people don't realize, and you're probably wondering, isn't this like an abuse recovery podcast? The reality is that there is so much overlap between the two. And I am basically only here to help facilitate this conversation with Candace. She is here to educate us, and do not turn this off. Do not turn this off. Please, please listen. So Candace, let's start with kind of like your presentation. Let's start at the beginning, and we're just going to go from there.
Okay. So let's start with the why, right? Why we do what we do. We do what we do because, as you just said, and I love what you said, do not turn this off. And if you even reach for that button to turn this off, you need to ask yourself why you're turning it off. Right? So we always have the disclaimer that if this affects anybody, the same as an abuse situation, if anything that is said here today triggers you, affects you, please don't just try to deal with it yourself. Make sure you reach back to us, make sure that you reach out to somebody, but make sure that you get the help that you need. Do not just shut down and try to internalize this. So there's a lot of good information here today, but the why we do what we do is because this is happening in our backyard. And what we don't want people to do is to keep thinking that this is just a foreign situation that only goes on in other countries. This is happening right here in your town, in your city, in your zip code. And that's the why of what we do to save our youth.
And that is so important. A lot of the times when we think of human trafficking, we think of third world countries, and we think of, these masked bandits stealing kids in the middle of the night.
Absolutely.
When the media has done a very good job of perpetuating that stereotype. And while that may be happening, yes, the reality is that it's happening right now. And the story, and I may be getting a little bit ahead of myself, but the thing that stood out to me most in your presentation, Candace, was when you told the story of this girl, and I'm probably going to butcher it. You can correct me. But there's a story of this girl who had been trafficked for a long time, and her mom didn't even know because she still went to school. She still came home. And it was such that blew my mind, because even though I knew it was happening here, I still had that concept of they kidnap the kids, they chuck their shoes out the window, and then they show up again 20 years later if they're lucky.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that is so on point, Karleigh, because, last year there was this whole thing that went around talking about the white van. Look out for the white van. The white van is snatching our kids. Absolutely not our human trafficking trail. And so what we don't like is when we hear stories like that, as you said, that flood the internet and the social media. And so now that deflects from what's really going on. So the story that you're referring to was absolutely a true story where, again, I refer to churches, organizations. Don't think it can't happen in your organization. And so we are a very close-knit group on the task force. So this particular incident was a contact of mine at the FBI that reached out to me to ask me to coach a family and a mother who was hysterical because she just found out her daughter had been trafficked for 2 years. 2 years, her 16. And she was like, you know, going through the normal, that's not possible. I'm a good mother, I'm a good parent. All the things that people think don't go along with trafficking. Newsflash, it happens, absolutely happens. And the irony of that was when she was telling me, she said she went to somebody in her church, and when she brought this to her church small group attention, they looked at her like she had 3 heads. And so we were talking, and when she disclosed what the church was, it was my church. So full circle, it came back to me. So what I said to her was, okay, so let me ask you this. They looked at you like you had 3 heads. Before you've learned what you've learned now that your daughter's been trafficked, would you have been one of those people that looked at me like I had 3 heads? And she said, absolutely. That's why we do what we do, Karleigh. If we don't get the awareness out there, it can be hidden in plain sight. People can do what they want to do and act like it doesn't happen, but it does. And it's closer than you think. You're an arm reach away from not only a traffic victim, but you're also an arm length away from a possible trafficker as well as the buyer. And so that's why the presentation you heard that I did was buyers beware. We targeted and went in on what the buyers are and what they look like and don't look like, because they're not our norm. So absolutely.
That is such a great segue to the next thing. And I think that's incredibly important. And I'd like to stay there for a second. Just like there's a stereotype that we think of when we think of like of an abuser, right? We think of an old fat white dude with a beer gut and a stained wife beater shirt with a bunch of amber bottles slurring his words. What a lot of people don't realize is that and those people do exist, but a majority of the time they are suave and they have chemistry and they seem so kind and they dress clean. I worded that so weird.
No, you didn't.
What do you run into when it comes to the buyers and the stereotype that you think of or that we think of?
Okay, so exactly what you just said. What people think they are, they're not. So let me back up just a couple of steps. The trafficker, everybody automatically thinks, like you just described the fat, bald white guy. With the trafficker, they look at them and they try to refer to them as pimps. And then they automatically think of the black guy with the big hat, with the big, shoes and the big collar. And we talk about some of the stereotypes, and there are, pictures that float around about what it could or couldn't look like. Absolutely not true. The this is the second largest business in the nation. And so when you think about that, this is truly a huge billion-dollar industry. And so, no, traffickers don't look like what you think they look like, and nor do the buyers. So I did a conference to an executive group, and I won't name the company, a huge organization. And I was so thankful that they invited me in to speak to their executives. And the point there was, if any of you as executives are buyers, when you're on your travel, when you're traveling up and down the 95 corridor, the next time you roll off a child, remember that that's somebody's child. And so that hit home with the CEO of that organization. It was like, wow, 342 executives in a room. And then you could hear a pin dropping. And like I said, if you're a buyer, please don't raise your hand. So I say that to say, Karleigh, a buyer can be a man in a suit, 3-piece suit, 2-piece suit with a shirt and tie, but they could also be that female executive. So get away from that myth of thinking all buyers are males. When we, came together and everybody that, was against Backpage, which was that dark web Backpage where you could order whatever you wanted. If you wanted a 12-year-old, a 15-year-old, whatever you wanted, you could order it on Backpage. And the time and effort and legislation that people had to put together to get that shut down, when you think about it, it's disgusting. And so when you look at the buyers that are going through the web and identifying what they want, nothing like what you think they are. Business people, people in legal positions, people that, have families, people that go home to their children after they've just laid down with a child. Think about that. So, that's what, the buyers look like. Remember back in the day, they used to say, what the stranger looks like, and you tell the children, beware of the ugly stranger, but they really don't look like that. It's the same thing for the buyers and for the traffickers, and the way that they lure them into the industry. Absolutely.
That, oh God, like, and now I'm just trying to like keep my composure because I cannot lose this entire episode. I am just, I cannot, I know,
it's hard to fathom, huh?
It's so infuriating. So like my personal story, and I told you a little bit, like I remember being 6 or 7 years old and being touched by the babysitter's son on a continual basis for this long time. He was clearly was a sick human being, but the fact that there are people that buy and that look at humans as objects and like to buy and sell for their own, like it, I'm like trying to put my words together because I just look over at my 7-year-old son and it's like, I cannot even,
Yeah. And one of the things you asked me the other day, when we were talking about, the presentations that we do. And like I said to you, very often I get asked, is my 14-year-old too young to come to the conference? And my answer is your 14-year-old too young to be brought in by a trafficker? No. So who would you rather get your child, me or them? And so that really is the hardcore truth, that you want to shelter your children, but you better educate your children, because if you don't educate them, someone else will. And again, we'll talk more about the vulnerabilities and what goes into that, but those are the things that people should be waking up to. And like you said, when you look at your 7-year-old, yuck. And that's exactly what you should be saying. What would happen if my child got into the hands of a trafficker? So rather than us be reactive, we're proactive. And that's why we want the awareness out there.
And that is so important because like right now, like I'm not gonna lie, I genuinely feel sick to my stomach right now. I don't want to keep talking about this. This is uncomfortable. This is hard. And like I can't even imagine, well, I'm gonna reach that point. Not that I don't want to talk to you, but it's just, this is hard. And the reason why a lot of people don't want to have these conversations is because they're hard and they're uncomfortable. And it's nauseating to think of. Like my own personal experience, I can't even imagine that. But to go to a website and order a child, like you're going to McDonald's and you're ordering a Big Mac meal, that
yeah. Right. So now when you relate that to how abuse is hidden, right? Let's not talk about it, because if we act like it doesn't exist, it might go away. Absolutely not. And so when we're trying to get into some of the schools and the churches and the private organizations that don't want to hear this, I'll get up there when I finally get in and say, is it possible that you have a buyer or a trafficker within your organization? Is there a reason why you don't want to be open to this? Besides the thought that it's sickening, it is sickening, but it's happening. So more importantly, if it's happening, let's address it. And anybody and everybody that cares about children, not just because you have children, any children, if you interact with children, educate yourselves as well as your children. Because one of the things I say to parents is, ask your child what they know about human trafficking. I think they will be unpleasantly surprised at how much their child can teach them. Absolutely.
That is, I mean, overall, and I feel like over the last couple of years, at least from what I have seen, there has definitely been an awakening and understanding of we have to have more of an open door policy with our kids. Like, are there going to be, like, there are certain conversations, especially as a single mom with a little boy, I am not going to want to have, but I want him to know he can come to me and ask me questions. I don't want him to go to Google. I don't want him to go to his friends at school who are less educated. I don't want him to go to the friend's big brother, big sister. Like, we've got to get comfortable in the uncomfortable, because if not, we're going to find out a lot of really harsh truths that no one wants. And oh my gosh, like, okay. I need to focus, rein it back in, and we got to keep this educational. So what are the things that we need to look out for as far as signs, whether it be buyers or victims, either one?
So I think, if I can just take it back just a couple of steps. So When we talk about human trafficking, we assume that everybody knows what that is. And even when they don't, and they think they know some of it, very often after presentations, they say, wow, I thought I knew what trafficking was, but now I realize I don't. So it really is the trafficking of a minor, force, fraud, or coercion. So even when we talk about the different types of trafficking, right? So you've got the human sex trafficking, you have the human labor trafficking. And I know tonight that we're focusing on the trafficking of on the sex side and the anti-trafficking. The labor trafficking is something that's a whole nother conversation for another session, but it certainly does happen. And then we have the familial trafficking when we talk about how a child is forced by a family member, not a stranger, but a family member. And it could be where there's been many, many cases where the child is forced to go sleep with the landlord to make sure that the rent is covered. You know, that's just one of many forms of familial trafficking, where you've got another family member. It doesn't have to be a parent. It can be another family member, brother, sister, uncle, aunt, somebody who is selling that child to a friend for sex, right? Anything that they're exchanging for. Fraud, force, or coercion. So when you look at how that happens, and you know, I was speaking probably about 2 years ago at a church in Maryland, and a 58-year-old woman came to me afterwards and said, I did not realize until I heard you speak tonight that I was a victim of familial trafficking. On the first of every month, I was forced to go and sleep with the landlord to pay my mother's rent. And until you told me tonight, which is why I do that disclaimer about if something we say tonight affects somebody, don't try to digest it yourself. Make sure you get the help, because you never know. 58 years old, from the age of 16, realizing that she was trafficked as a family member. She didn't look at it as trafficking, and back then it wasn't called trafficking. So what are the signs that we look for? We have to look at, first of all, the education, by educating yourself. So what does it look like when a child comes home and tells you, Mom, you know, I'm dating somebody, I'm 15 and he's 27, right? What is a 27-year-old doing with a 15-year-old? The obvious, right? And so what I say to parents is, you know, you'll have a parent say, well, I'd rather she brings him home and meets me. No. There is something that's going on, even if it's not trafficking, is something that they're leading up to. So when we talk about the whole grooming and setting them up, it is a process. So if they're going to date these young ladies and these young boys, however they're dating them, they will invest in them 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, until they get them where they want them. So we say, well, who are the children that they're pulling in? It's usually the vulnerable. And so when we talk about children that are every day, it doesn't mean it's not a poverty thing, it's not a socioeconomic thing, it's not that. They will get whoever feels that they can get to that vulnerable child. So we say our giveaways, throwaways, runaways. Well, I say, you know, when you're not investing in your child, somebody else can. So you better get your child before somebody else does. And so when you look at that and you say, well, you know, what does that look like when they're doing that whole grooming process? It can be something as simple as a bunch of girls skipping school, going over to the boys' house, they're all hanging out. Somebody's got an older boyfriend who's bringing the alcohol, bringing whatever. The next thing you know, it's happened a couple of times. Now they've got them where they're serving other older gentlemen. Money's exchanged. The victim does not see any of that money, do not realize that they're in a situation, scared to speak up because they didn't have any business skipping school in the first place. Now they're in something they can't get out of. It can be as simple as that. So as a parent or a guardian or a grandparent, you want to be able to create that safe space for that child. Give them that safe space where they know they can always come to you no matter what. And as cliche as that may sound, Karleigh, we don't do that all the time when it comes to our youth.
Nope.
So the youth may go and speak to a counselor, they may go and speak to somebody else, but if they don't feel that they have that safe space to be able to vent, they're not coming to you. And so that's one of the biggest things I say. Always let your children, neighborhood children know, if you need to talk, I'm here. No judgment. It's kind of like the safe driver where you call the cab and they take you home, no questions asked, that type of thing, because that's the only way that you're going to reach them. So some of the signs that you would look for, the obvious signs, are they wearing clothes you know they can't afford? Did they suddenly come up with a new cell phone? Do they have a second cell phone? You know, are they on the internet and you have no clue who they're corresponding with, what rooms they're going into? Get yourself involved in your child's life, because very often that's the window that they're coming at them from. They'll give them a cell phone so they can reach them with nobody knowing. They're buying them clothes, and that all looks cute. They're taking them to get their hair done, get the nails done. With the guys, they're buying them expensive tennis shoes. You know, if your child doesn't have a job and you don't buy them those shoes, where are those $300, $400, $500 tennis shoes coming from? And what I say to the youth is, you may be getting that now, but you're going to pay back every penny of that on your back, every penny of it. And so those are some of the signs. I had a grandmother ask me one day, so what do you do when they won't give you the code to the phone? What? The parent, child, you're the parent, they're the child. Oh no. So if there are things that they're definitely refusing to give you, you should pay attention, because that means they're obviously hiding something. Doesn't mean they're a trafficking victim, no. But it does mean that they're doing things and getting into situations that could easily be the segue into a trafficking victim. Absolutely.
Oh gosh, so much. But the thing that you mentioned a little bit ago is that trying to like formulate my thoughts. My brain's going a mile a minute. Just like how there is a stereotype that when it comes to abuse, it's as if like they start throwing you into a wall right away. It doesn't start that way. They have to get in your head first. And it is, and I didn't even think of that when it comes to human trafficking. I am embarrassingly ignorant the more that I find out. But it just makes sense that like they take 3, 6, not however long it takes to get them, because they, again, they're going to get an ROI on it. So they're investing now to get the ROI later.
Absolutely.
And there is, again, back to the stereotype of being kidnapped, checking the shoes out the window and never going home again. It starts slow. And we have got to start recognizing that they get in your head first. And just like how I preach all the time, y'all hear me talk about it all the time on the podcast. I am sick and tired of hearing, well, why didn't you leave? Well, why did you go back? When your brain has been altered to that point, you don't even think clearly, especially if you start young. If it starts in the family, you may not even know that that's not normal. Just like that poor woman didn't know that it wasn't normal. She just thought that was a fact of life.
Absolutely.
If that just becomes your normal, all of a sudden you end up 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old going, wait a minute, you're telling me that wasn't normal?
And that's interesting you say that, because I always say trafficking didn't just pop up in the last 2 or 3 years, right? It's always been there. It was just known by a different name, or it was ignored. And that's a fact. And so I love the piece when you said about when people tell you, why didn't they just leave? I'm huge on that, because like I tell people, until you've walked a mile in their shoes, please don't judge them.
Preach.
Because fear is so, so heavy for so many people. And then you have the other side of it when, I have coached survivors that have gone back to the trafficker and people can't understand it. And I say, it's a brainwashing. So when they've convinced them, I'm the only one that loves you, they don't want you, then you're not going back to them. They don't care about you. When that vulnerable person starts to believe that is their truth. And you cannot judge them for what their truth is. So it's a process, even when they come out of the life, it's a process coaching them back on track and getting them where they need to be and giving them a sense of normalcy. Because like I say, that 15-year-old runaway that has done 2 years in the life has come back as a 17-year-old that has slept with 10 to 12 men a night, male and female. You think you're getting back a 17-year-old? No, you're not. You are not. That age progression has zoomed ahead. And it just is a reality. So now you're flaking away the layers of trauma that this child has had to experience. And so the last thing that they need is the judgment. And so when people would say to me, well, why would they go back to the trafficker? And the other side of that is, why would the trafficker be bold enough to come to the safe house to look for the survivor? If I took your paycheck away, are you coming after me? Or are you going to walk away? Oh, you can keep it. And so that's what these children are to them, a paycheck. So if you've got children that are making them $1,000, $2,000 a night, and you take that away from them, yes, they're coming back for them. Absolutely, they're coming back for them. And that's why they have to have the rules that they do when they take them into these safe houses or when they get them the help that they need. Does it all go smooth? Absolutely not. Do they all want to be rescued? Absolutely not. And they can't do better until they know better. And so when you show them that there is a better way and you're getting them back on track, until that happens, nobody can judge them at all. No judgment needed.
And that something really hit me too as you were talking, because I'll be the first to admit I did not realize in myself how much I had actually gone through. And I was very judgmental. I was judgmental of survivors of domestic violence, and I was very judgmental of survivors of human trafficking because they would go back, because like they wouldn't leave, because like it's like just walk away, whatever. I had all of these things in my head, and I am the first to admit that. But looking back too, that may also be the only quote unquote caretaker that they've known. If they couldn't go to their parents for things, if they couldn't show up for their family, if Lord knows whatever had happened to them, like I look back at my life and holy crap, I was a prime candidate. Like I just look back and I remember thinking to myself, like I hated when people would say, oh, well, Karleigh, you're loved. God doesn't make mistakes. And I'd look at them and I said, no, you're wrong. Because I'm the first mistake. I am here. God screwed up when he made me. And I cannot even imagine how low these people, these girls, these kids, these adults, whoever, how low they are. And when you're that low, your logic goes out the window. All you want is those basic human needs. You want food and you want community. And if you have that, and if you know that that's going to be there, no matter what the hell you have to do to go through in order to get that, you're going to go after it. Because if you can't get it easily accessible, you're going to get it however you can.
Yeah. And you bring up another good point. One of the things that I say when you ask for people, what do they look for? The one thing I say when we talk about judgmental, if you have a child that comes to you and tells you something, anybody that's listening, please do not disbelieve them. Please do not. That is like triple the damage of a trafficker. If somebody comes to you, if you have a child, and again, we're on the proactive side, if you have a boyfriend or a partner or a girlfriend that is interfering with your child and your child brings that to you and tells you they're being touched or being abused, please don't say you're jealous, because we've seen this situation where the kids have run into the arms of a trafficker because something was happening with them at home. Nobody believed them, and they got to be the victim because, the parent got to be the victim because it was like, they're just jealous. They don't like the situation I'm in. They're jealous of my relationship. This is a child. This is a child. So please, whether you want to disbelieve them, please don't do it. Don't do it publicly. Take your child, listen to what they have to say, and not only listen, hear what they have to say. And then when you have done your due diligence and your investigation, and that child knows you are for them through and through, then you can do your follow-up from there. But there is nothing worse than when the child gets the guts to come to you and tell you what is happening to them, and you make it about you. It is so degrading for the child, devastating. Now, when they become that runaway or that throwaway or that giveaway, and they run out there, exactly what that trafficker is telling them. Nobody cares about you. I'm the only one that cares about you. So think about that. Am I running back to that where nobody believed me, nobody trusts me, or am I going to move forward with this person who says he's got my back, he's going to take care of me, he's going to do this, she's going to provide me with this, she's going to provide me with that. And so I say that to say, believe your child at all costs until you have done your due diligence and got them the help and the assistance they needed. And if there is a false accusation, which there have occasionally been, if there is a false accusation, don't you be the judge of that. You get them the help they need. And if that means they have to go to therapy and you have to decide what's going on with that trauma, then you've done your due diligence as a parent. But don't run them out of your door and into the arms of a trafficker, please. Please don't do that. Take time with your children.
And that is such an important point too, about like believing them. And well, there may be a false accusation or two. And this is the thing that, I've got to like rein it in because I can go off on this. I like something that pisses me off to know end is when a rape victim comes up and shares their story. Well, are you sure? Are you making it up?
Mhm.
Do false
Yes.
accusations exist? Yes. Do they happen? Yes. But it is a very small percentage. And
Very
personally,
small.
I was told time and time again that I was probably making it up. I was over exaggerating. I asked for it. I was doing it for attention. And it's just like, you know what? The number of times I tried to take my own life because I was like, well, then apparently I guess I am making it up. Like the fact that I'm still here is a miracle in and of itself. And so, like, do false accusations exist? Yes, but why are you punishing the majority of people who desperately need you? They just need to hear that you believe them. Like, seriously, a simple, I believe you, can save someone's life.
Yes.
A simple,
Yes.
I hear you, I validate you,
Yes.
I believe you, and I'm here for you can mean the difference between life and death. And that's not an exaggeration. And the reality is that if they are coming up with false accusations anyway, there is obviously something underlying that they desperately need help with.
Exactly. And that's why I said follow through, because at the very least, if it does turn out to be a false accusation, there is something underlying that they need that assistance with. There's something going on in their life that they had to come up with that. Whether they don't feel that they're getting what they need at home, again, those are the primary things that a trafficker looks for. So even if it was a false accusation, and as you said, tiny, tiny, tiny number considering those that are actual situations. So if you run into that rare occasion, that's still somebody crying for help. It's just another form of crying for help. And if they get to the point they cry for help in the arms of a trafficker, here we are again, another child. And as you said, the suicide rates, all those things that go along with that, when they aren't heard and it is their truth and it is what happened and they're discounted, please let's not do that. Please let's not.
And this is, oh my gosh. Like, see, I swear what we need is to just block out 24 hours and just have like a conversation. Cause I just want to absorb like everything. Okay. So reining it back in, what are some top super important things that people need to know? Like if you had to pick the top 3 to 5 things that people need to know regarding human trafficking, what would those things be?
The need to know is that it doesn't only happen to girls. It's the myths that go along with it. It's girls and boys. You need to know that it's happening in your neighborhood. And I challenge everybody to please Google, surrounding zip codes, look at what has gone on and get involved. The need to know to get involved because it is happening and they are recruiting our everyday children. It's not poverty. It is certainly not, as I said, a certain class, a certain race, a certain gender. It's all of the above. So when people want to say, oh, they're crossing the border, no, they're not crossing the border, they're going up and down the corridor. Truckers Against Trafficking do a huge amount with us as far as what's going on with the truckers, right? Because the truckers see the stuff on the highway, they're at a lot of the motels, hotels, they have these young girls that try to approach them in the trucks. That alone has been a huge thing for us. So when you ask me, the number one to me is for people to get involved. And when I say get involved, if you belong to a church, if you belong to an organization, wherever your company is, please do something to help with the awareness. Because if we keep telling people, the more it gets out there, well, the more we reduce the bias. And if the buyers are listening to this, you know who you are. And I say, do you really want to risk your family? Do you want to risk the embarrassment? Do you want to risk somebody else's child having to go through this trauma because you want to satisfy your need? Really? Is that really what you want? And I guarantee some buyers will listen to this. They will be looking for things they can do to avoid, to get away from, things that they don't have to look for, just all of the above. And so our law enforcement, all of the different agencies are working very, very hard to eliminate the buyers and the traffickers. But we need the public to get involved. We need them to say, hey, I can host a panel at my church. I can host something at my organization. I can have you come in and write an anti-trafficking thing for our policy and procedures manual, because I do HR consulting also. And so we don't miss a beat with anything. anything that you want to be able to get that awareness out there. We don't charge, we do the training. They do everything on the task force as far as training personnel, SANE personnel, nurses, police officers, all of the above, teachers. A lot of the schools don't want you in the school speaking on it, because if we act like it doesn't happen and we don't have you at our school, then it will go away. And what I tell the great schools that do allow us to come in and speak on this, that we appreciate it, because when that child comes in and they're tired and they're falling asleep and you assume they've been up all night on the phone, or you assume that they've been up all night playing video games, no. In a lot of cases, if they are trafficked children, they are sent back into the school. And like I ask people, what's in school? Other children. So when they go back to school to recruit, they are forced by the trafficker to go back there and get other boys and girls to come along, because bigger business. So don't sleep on thinking it's not happening in your schools, and if we act like it doesn't and pull down the blinds, it'll go away. It will not. It is happening in our schools. And so when you ask me the top things, it's got to be get involved, share the awareness, educate yourself on more on what is involved, get involved to change the laws. There was a time when children could be charged with prostitution. How insane is that? So for people that really say they care about children, don't wait until it happens to you. It's kind of like an illness, right? Nobody investigates cancer until they get cancer. And then when they get cancer, they want to read everything there is to know about it. Too little, too late. And so I say the same about trafficking. Don't wait until it's affected your family. Get involved and say, how can I help? If you know that vulnerable neighborhood child, you know those children that don't get meals. When people ask me, how has COVID affected trafficking? So sometimes in the schools, those were the only hot meals they got. Those were the only counselors that they could go and talk to about what was going on, the abuse and the trafficking and everything that's going on at home. So when the school shut down, the kids are living this every day in the homes. So get involved when you work with children. If you know that vulnerable child and it comes to mind and you think, wow, and they talk about vulnerable children in the foster care system, you know, any type of vulnerability that you see, that child that is never told enough how they're loved. It's something as small as saying, oh my gosh, I love your hair. And that child says, oh, you know, that little bit of attention that you don't give your child and somebody else does. Please make yourself aware, please. And if you're not sure on how to get that education, reach out to one of us. That's what we're here for. So if they reach out to us, Karleigh, and we educate them to educate someone else, they've done some of their part. There's so much more that they could do, but at the very, very least, host an event that we are making sure we're talking about it. Because one thing that makes the buyers uncomfortable is when it's close to home. When we start getting close to home and talking about some of the buyers and what they look like and how they engage, it makes them uncomfortable. That's what we want. We want the buyers to be uncomfortable.
And that is something that I have been driving home regarding abuse specifically, is that if we don't talk about it, it's going to happen more and they're going to get away with it. If we choose to stay quiet about it, we are aiding the buyers. We are stepping in and we are helping them. We are doing their job for them. Because if they're not allowed to talk about sex at home, if they're not allowed to ask questions, if they're not allowed to say, Mom, Dad, I feel really crappy about the way you've been treating me for the last couple of weeks, they're going to go get it from somewhere else. And if we can't talk about it, it's not that it's going to go away. It's going to get worse. And it's high freaking time that we start getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that is why I felt my parents did the best that they could with what they had. But unfortunately, the status quo at the time was you don't ask questions. You do what you're told. You don't speak up. You don't talk about sex. You don't talk about anything awkward, because that's wrong. And what does that do? It opens up to asking questions and Googling things and asking certain people. I don't understand how I'm alive right now. The number of chat rooms I lived in, like, y'all youngins may not remember the whole AOL AIM chat rooms and the Yahoo chat or whatever. But like, me and my best friend after school would go and log in, and we would be up all night talking with men that could have been our age, or could have been 60-year-olds doing Lord knows what while talking to us. Like, yes, it's uncomfortable. And right now I am physically nauseous, because all I can think of is my 7-year-old son, who is at the age that I was when things happened to me. So yes, it's uncomfortable. I'm not saying you got to get comfortable with it. I don't think we should get comfortable with it. It should always be uncomfortable. But if we don't talk about it, if we don't step up, and if we don't start talking for the people who don't have a voice, then we are just doing the buyer's job for them, because they don't want us to get comfortable with talking about it. We got to stick with it, because the more we stick to the status quo, the more that they can just slide right through, right in front of us, right in front of us.
So you bring up something about the chat rooms. And for me, it's huge when we look at COVID. 18 months of these kids not being in school for the most part. And what are they doing on that computer day in, day out?
Looking for connection.
There you go. And so I guarantee that the numbers have tripled in what's going on with our trafficking, because if they can't get out and go to school, and they can't get out and go and do something else, they can still get out and go meet that trafficker at the corner. They can get into those chat rooms and talk about all those things as if they're talking to another 14-year-old. And guess what? They're not. Exactly what you said. They're talking to somebody that's older. So again, these are the things when I say, parents, please check on your children. Please check and make sure that you're talking to them. Because if they're not talking to you, they're talking to someone. When I did a presentation for a group of youth, and I asked them, how many of you have skipped school? So many hands in that auditorium went up, right? Okay, like you say. And so when they do that, and then I say, well, how many of you have met one of your friends' older boyfriends or girlfriends? Hands go up. How many of you have been asked to do things that you're like, I'm not doing that? Hands go up. So if parents are not engaging with their youth and asking these questions, and their kids don't feel comfortable sharing, great candidate for trafficking, great candidate. And you know, I shared with you that story about the fast food place where one of my youth that I've kind of beat it into with all of them, trafficking, what the signs are, what to look out for. And you think they're not listening even when you kind of hope they are. And that young lady that was working and came into the group and said, I think I was approached by a trafficker, and goes on to tell me about a young man who worked at the fast food place that tried to get her to come with him because he had a job where she could make $300 to $400 a night. And when she said, I think he was trying to recruit me, the way you describe it, Ms. Candice, absolutely. So then some people say, why would he go work at a fast food place for a minimum wage? He can do a month at that fast food place. And if he recruits 10 to 15 girls and boys that are now being trafficked, how much do you think that's making him? It's not making them any money. So they are everywhere. Traffickers are everywhere. They are working on our kids in the most insane places that you wouldn't expect them to be. And they will do what they need to do in order to get what they need to get. And so we have to be very wise about it, very wise.
And I think, and you, again, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think the important thing too is we can't come at this, and neither of us are trying to get you to live your life in fear or come at this in a place of paranoia and never letting your kid outside of the bubble. But we have to come at this from a, hey, you know what, Jimmy? Hey, Axel, hey, Brenda, we're going to have a conversation about some real things that are happening in the world. I don't want you to live your life in fear, but I want you to be aware. Just like how we have to be aware of red flags in abusive relationships. You got to be aware of, red flags, in when people of authority, like in Legally Blonde, the douchey older lawyer tried to get her to sleep with him so she could get her way. Just like that. We don't live our lives in fear. Some of us do as we're still healing. But aside from that, we have to come at this from a place of, we have to be our kids' strength, and we have to be there for them to come talk to us. And we have to be able to say, okay, we're going to have a tough conversation, but just because I want you to be aware. It's not about living your life in fear, and it's not about avoiding any happiness in life because you have to think about all these things. It's just, this could be the difference between life and death. This could be the difference between life and your child wanting to not be alive. And that is so important, to not do it from a place of fear and paranoia, but a place of, okay, I'm going to empower myself with this education and with this knowledge so I can act on it and save Lord knows how many lives. Because if you stop your child from doing it here, they may tell their friends who tell their friends, and then it's a beautiful snowball effect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even getting together with other parents in the neighborhood to kind of have an open conversation. It doesn't have to be a fearful thing. It's an education thing. And ask the kids, do a little group forum with them and make it fun. And, today I heard this thing on human trafficking. What do you guys know about it? And like I said, might educate you. And the other thing is when these people look at what has happened in their neighborhood and they see the types of people that are the buyers, and the types of people that are the traffickers, I think that is a huge eye-opener, Karleigh, because they're like, what? I thought it was going to be this type of person. I didn't think it was going to be the CEO of a company or, the person who runs a local hardware store, or I know that person. So when they look at that, and I always love to when we do panels and we bring the prosecutors on and they talk about some of those cases. I know there's a really bad case in Baltimore. And when we talk about that mind control and how they control and why the people can't walk away, there was a guy who went down for a long, long time and everybody showed up at the courtroom. He snapped her dog's neck as a control mechanism for her. So when you read these stories and you hear these real stories, it puts it into perspective for people. And it is a hard thing to swallow, but the reality is it is happening. And so when you look at it and you think, wow, that's what they talk about when they talk about the mind control. And, when people talk about I talk to everybody about trafficking, and my OBGYN, I was talking to her and I said, do you look out for it? And she goes, Candace, there was a time that I did think there was somebody that came in here, but then I thought, no, it's, that can't be, because we talk about how when somebody comes in and they look like they're scared to talk, right? That could be abuse as well as trafficking. And so if you see something, say something. If you're not sure, say it again. But at the same time, why wait until you read about that person in the paper the next day? So what she said to me was, I never thought about it until you just said that, because she had children. And I said, do you know how many of the traffickers impregnate their girls to be able to keep them? Because what do mothers care about? Their children, right? So there's so much more to this, Karleigh. You could do, like you said, a 24-hour medley, and we could still carry, not cover every single avenue of it. But it is huge. It is so large that people need to look at it, read about it, look at the prosecution side, look at how the police are really doing their stings, how the different agencies are working on this, and how we're restoring our people and our children back to everyday life. They'll never be 100% healed, but we're doing everything that we can to prevent it.
That is, there is so much, and it makes me so sad that we only have an hour, but I can say with certainty, of course, if Candace wants to, that I would love to have you back again and Absolutely. Talk, because the thing you mentioned earlier, I did not even think about labor trafficking. And that's something else. Again, y'all, this is, again, I'm embarrassingly ignorant, but I would rather say that I need to learn than pretend like I know and don't say anything, because I am sick and tired of the silence. So one, thank you so much, Candace. I am so grateful to you. I am so glad that we connected. Like I am.
Likewise.
Oh, I'm so excited. So where can everybody go to connect with you, connect with Freshwaters, learn more, get educated, all the things?
Okay. So if they can follow me on Instagram as Freshwaters CSP, very easy. The Maryland Human Trafficking Task Force, and we will help anybody form a task force in their area. It's mdhumantrafficking.org. They can go there, they can reach me through there, they can reach out. One of the things we say when people don't know who to call, the national hotline. That number is 1-888-3737-888. So that should be one that you can memorize. If you're out, you're not sure, you make that phone call, they will investigate it. Give them as many details as you can, as much as you can, and they will follow up. So again, that's 1-888-3737-888. And those are probably the three major things. If you go on our site, you can reach out, you can email us, and we will get back to you and tell you what you need to do.
Thank you so much. And y'all, Washington, look out, because I don't know if there's a task force here already, but if there is, I'm gonna get involved. And if not, one's about to start, homie. Amen. I am so ready. All of those links that she mentioned will be in the show notes. I highly recommend. No, not recommend. I encourage, I would say demand, but I feel like that's rude. But go and get educated. Yes, it's uncomfortable. Yes, you're going to feel sick. That's a reality. But think about that is a small portion, a very small drop in the bucket of what these kids go through every single day. And the least we can do is get educated so we can show up for them in the best way possible. Candace, thank you so much. I am so excited to connect with you again. I'm so excited to get this episode out there. And you're going to hear me say this in the outro too. Please share this. Share this with your boss. Share this with your coworkers. Share this with your pastor. Share this. Because this is not only life-changing information, it's potentially life-saving information. Yes. And we ain't being dramatic, y'all. So thank you so much, Candace. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you, Karleigh. And what I'm saying is we need more like you that not just talk about it, they are about it. If everybody did one of these things that you're doing, as the multiple things that you do as a parent, love you to pieces. Can't wait to work with you again. Thank you.
Thank you.